June 26th, 1284, during the feast of St. John and St. Paul. 130 children of the town of Hamelin, Germany, disappeared into the hills of the German countryside, never to be seen again. This would become the story of the Pied Piper. But what really happened? Did the children of Hamelin simply disappear into the night following a magician playing a flute? Or was there something more sinister afoot? Hello and welcome to History is a Disaster. I'm your host Andrew, and tonight we got a mystery on our hands. We're taking a dive into a fairy tale and the true story behind it, or at least mostly true anyways, as we look into the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Most people are at least passingly familiar with the Pied Piper story, but if not, well, here's a condensed version. The streets of Hamelin were overrun with rats. Nothing they did would rid them of these pests, and as the mayor and town council discussed what to do, a mysterious stranger arrives in town and says for a hefty fee he can get rid of the rats. They quickly agreed, and the stranger played his flute, and the rats followed, dancing and frolicking through the streets as he led them out of town. The rats merrily followed the sounds right into the rushing river outside the town. When he returned to town, the mayor refused to pay his price, offering to feed him and line his pockets with coin. Besides, the rats are dead and gone. What's he gonna do about it? In response, he pulls out his flute and starts to play. All the children in town began to follow him, dancing and frolicking as he leads them out of town and towards the mountains. When they reach the mountains, he opens a crack in them and leads the children through, sealing it up behind them. Sounds pretty fantastical. I mean, it is a fairy tale after all, right? And well, mostly it is. However, something did happen to the children of Hamelin in 1284. There is a private residence in Hamelin that dates back to 1602, which has an inscribed plaque on its stone facade, which is similar to an earlier one on the building's windows. It reads, AD 1284, on the 26th of June, the days of the feast of St. John and St. Paul. 130 children born in Hamelin were led out of the town by a piper wearing multicolored clothes. After passing the Calvary near the Koppenberg, they disappeared forever. There is an entry in the town's records dated 1384 that says, "It's been 100 years since our children left us." There is also a stained glass window in the local church that depicted the Pied Piper leading ghostly white children out of town. This window would unfortunately get destroyed in the 17th century. The Lundberg manuscript, written around 1440, along with 5 historical memory verses, all reference the event, or a similar story, of children disappearing while following a Pied Piper to a place called Calvary or Koppen. Note that none of them mention any rats. This detail wouldn't be added to the story for a few centuries. Sometime in the 1600s, if I'm not mistaken. That'll be important later when we go into some of the theories. Now, some people doubt these early records, but the fact that they keep referencing the date and something traumatic happens leads me and a lot of other historians to believe there has to be some truth to it, and the lack of specifics have led to numerous theories. Okay, so let's clear up something first, then we'll go into some of the early stories and evidence. Pied Piper. What the hell does pied mean? Was he a cook? Did he eat the kids? Nope and nope. Pied just means multicolored. Clothes in the 13th century were typically solid colors. While they would wear multiple colors of clothes, it was usually layered, where something that was pied was made from different colored fabric, either in stripes or large patches. Pied usually made the wearer stand out, which, again, important detail we'll come back to later. So what evidence do we have? First, we have that plaque made in the 1300s that mentions the children disappearing, along with an entry in the town's chronicle in 1384 saying it's been 100 years since our children disappeared. Next, we have that Lüneburg manuscript. And just a quick note, Lüneburg was or is a town in Germany. This was written somewhere between 1430 and 1450. And the manuscript gives a little more detail into the story. Here follows a marvelous wonder which transpired in the town of Hamelin in the diocese of Minden in the year of our Lord 1284 on the feast of Saints John and Paul. A certain young man, 30 years of age, handsome and well dressed, so that all who saw him admired him because of his appearance, crossed the bridges and entered the town by the west gate. He then began to play all through the town a silver pipe of the most magnificent sort. All the children who heard his pipe, in the number of 130, followed him to the east gate and out of the town, to the so-called execution place or Calvary. There they proceeded to vanish, so that no trace of them could be found. The mothers of the children ran from town to town, but they found nothing. It is written, a voice was heard from on high, and a mother was bewailing her son. And as one counts the years according to the year of our Lord, or according to the first, second, or third year of an anniversary, so do the people in Hamelin reckon the years after the departure and disappearance of their children. This report I found in an old book, and the mother of the deacon, Johann von Lüd, saw the children depart. In 1556, a new gate was built in one of the city walls with an inscription. In the year 1556, 272 years after the magician led 130 children out of the town, this portal was erected. In the 16th century, we start to get more accounts of the events in Hamelin. This one comes from the town of Bamberg, Germany. There is also a mountain which lies approximately a rifle shot away from this town called Calvary. And the townspeople say that in 1283, a man was seen, possibly a musician, wearing clothes of many colors and possessing a pipe, which he played in the town. Whereupon the children in the town ran out as far as the mountain, and there they all disappeared into it. Only 2 children returned home, and they were naked. One was blind and the other mute. But when the women began to look for their children, the man said to them that he would come again in 300 years and take more children. 130 children had been lost, and the people of this place were afraid that the same man would come again in 1583. 12 years later, the Zimmer Chronicle, written by Count Robin Christoph von Zimmer of Swabia, expands the story with the inclusion of rats. Since I am again returning to matters concerning rats, I cannot neglect to mention a miracle of God, which in identical form was reported many years ago in the town of Hamelin in Westphalia, concerning the banishment of rats, which story, because of its unusual nature, is definitely worth remembering. And there to conclude that the Almighty created some odd creatures without instilling in them human reason. Several hundred years ago, the inhabitants of the town of Hamelin in Westphalia were plagued with such a large quantity of rats that it becomes unbearable. It so happened that a foreigner, an unknown or traveler, much as the traveling students of long ago, came into town. Hearing the troubles and complaints of burghers, he proposed whether they would consider a reward for him if he were to remove the rats from the town. They were overjoyed with such news, and for his offer they promised to pay him a sum of several hundred guilders. With that he went through the town with a little pipe, which he then placed to his mouth and commenced to play. Immediately all the rats in the town came running out of the houses, and in unbelievable numbers began to follow his feet as he walked out of the town. He banished them to the nearest mountain, and no more rats were seen in the town. This accomplished, he demanded his promised reward, but they had hidden it away, confessing that although they had been in agreement with the sum, that since the matter had caused him no difficulty, but rather he had dispensed with his task so easily, not by hard work, but by an unusual art, therefore they felt that he should not ask for so much, but lower his sights and take less. The stranger, however, insisted on keeping the original agreement, and he persisted in seeking the sum promised him. And if they didn't give it to him, they would rue it. The townspeople, however, stayed with the opinion that this was far too much money, and they no longer wished to give it to him. When he realized that he was not going to receive anything, the stranger began to walk through the streets with his pipe as before. There, the majority of the children in the town under the age congregated, and they followed at his feet and out of town to the nearest mountain. The mountain miraculously opened up, and the strangers and the children went inside. Immediately afterwards, it closed up again, and neither stranger nor children were ever seen again. Now there was great wailing throughout the town, and the people could do nothing but commit themselves to God and admit their guilt. The town reported this wondrous story in all its correspondence as an eternal reminder, and added the right number on the date according to the birth of Christ on the end. However, they added to the departure of the children in such and such a year. So obviously, the story has changed and grown over the centuries, with different writers adding in details well after the fact, making the story more fantastical than the last and spawning multiple theories on what actually happened to the kids. What are these theories I keep babbling about, you ask? Well, you probably didn't, but gonna tell you anyways. There's a few. We'll start with the least likely ones and work towards the most likely. Our first theory, and one of the least likely, is that an outbreak of the plague swept through the town. This theory stems from the inclusion of all the rats in town, and rats were the major carrier of the plague. Okay, couple obvious problems with this. The first problem was rats weren't added to the story for almost 400 years. Secondly, if it was the plague, more than just the children would have been affected. And there's no mention of any adults disappearing. And the fact that all the inscriptions and records say they disappeared, not died. Saying they disappeared seemed rather specific to me. I would assume they would have said they died if that's what happened. Also, there is no records of any outbreaks of plague in the area at this time. It'd be over 50 years before this area would be hit with the plague. The next least likely theory is that the Piper was some sort of early serial killer. He somehow manages to lure all these kids away and killed them. Now, 130 kids? It's a lot of damn kids. How the hell is one person going to control 130 kids, especially after you start killing them? I'm lucky to control 2 kids, let alone 130. Fuck that. No, thank you. Wouldn't even want to try. Other highly unlikely theories include the dancing plague, which swept through Europe centuries earlier, where people dance uncontrollably, oftentimes dancing till exhaustion and death. Mass poisoning, which, if it was poisoning, would have had to be intentional, since it only affected kids, since there was no adult deaths reported. And a mass drowning. Again, these are all deaths, and the records specifically state they disappeared. A more likely theory, but my opinion, still unlikely, is the kids were swept up in a children's crusade. Earlier in the century, around 1212, roughly 30,000 kids from France and Germany were, quote-unquote, recruited to fight in a crusade to reclaim Jerusalem. Most of the children in this crusade were killed in a shipwreck, or possibly sold into slavery in Tunisia. The Children's Crusade is just a theory with no evidence either way, although, if this was the case, I would assume there would be records of it somewhere, or at least records of kids disappearing from other towns. The next most likely theory is that the children were led away by someone to participate in midsummer celebrations, and something happened along the way. One theory suggests that some of these festivities involved setting fires in the hill and some accident killed all the children, or they came across a group of Christians which attacked the group and either killed everyone or kidnapped the kids and took them to different monasteries, which I believe was maybe not common, but at least a rare occurrence as far as fights between Christians and pagans, so not too far-fetched of a theory. Another possibility is that they followed a migration recruiter by mistake, believing it to be part of the Midsummer Festival. While any one of these could be likely, if they've been killed somehow, whether by fire or an accident or some kind of attack, you'd think there'd be some kind of record of it. And then there's the most likely theory, migration. At this time in history, there was a big push to settle more of Eastern Germany, especially around Berlin. There was emigration recruiters that went from town to town in bright clothing and played a musical instrument to attract and lead migrants to new settlements. Sound familiar? Bright clothes, playing an instrument, and leading people off. And younger people would have been highly desirable for new settlements. Some historians think this is most likely what happened, pointing to the fact that a lot of surnames that appear in the Hamlin town records are very common in the areas around Berlin compared to the rest of Germany. The only issues with this theory is no adults went with, and recruiting nothing but children seems unlikely. Who would want new settlements with nothing but children? I mean, come on. I've read Lord of the Flies. Okay, I watched the movie. Either way, I know how that ends, and it doesn't go well. Now, while we will probably never know what really happened in 1284, the legend endures, and Hamlin, Germany is thriving. They leaned into the legend and built up an economy around the Pied Piper and tourism. Tours in town take people past half-timbered houses and 16th century manors with Gothic, that's the word, Gothic, gables and scrollwork, and other examples of local architectural styles with gargoyles leering down and intricate wood carvings. Hamlin looks like something out of a fairy tale. And after all that walking, when you get hungry, you can stop in a local restaurant for the signature dish of rat tails made from thinly sliced pork, or you can hit up a bakery for rat-themed breads and cakes. Afterwards, you can hit the Hamlin Museum, or during the summer, local actors put on the Pied Piper open air play. Now, I'd tell you where they put this play on, but it's in German and has 1,000 consonants and 100 vowels. And I am tongue-tied enough as it is and not even going to try tripping over all that. So you'll just have to look into it for yourself. And that is the dark and grim history behind the fairy tale of the Pied Piper. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, if you liked the episode, you can always leave a rating or review, or send any questions or comments to historiesofdisaster@gmail.com, or check us out on Facebook. Thanks and goodbye.